Welcome to the Free Money Podcast. This is the show where we explore what's keeping the world from investing in progress, answer the questions on the minds of people in the know, and give you the Brooklyn Bay Area consensus about institutional investing that you desperately crave. I'm Sloan Ortel on the Brooklyn side of that.
And I'm Ashby Monk. And I think I too often work for free instead of making money. But here we are. Here we are. Are we making money on this podcast yet?
Yeah, it's actually paying for it. I just bought a new car with it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Is my accounting a little?
We are.
I did actually
we do
just buy
have
a
a
car.
new sponsor. Maybe we can.
That's right.
The
Portable
sponsor.
Alpha. Yeah, the Portable Alpha, the solution for all of your investment needs, comes now in convenient powdered form, thanks to these two geniuses on this very podcast.
It's interesting how Portable Alpha can be consumed in a beverage.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny too because it's like usually Portable Alpha is really expensive.
It is.
How
much is this?
And
how much is this Portable Alpha we're offering?
Well, it depends on obviously the size of the investment that you make, right? So if you were to buy, 10 pallets of Portable Alpha, we'd give it at a discounted rate, But, for ordinary sort of retail investors, I think, $50 is probably the starting point.
Yeah, I think we should also mention that the first amount of Portable Alpha is free.
Yes,
it's just that in order to buy that first amount, you also need to buy at the same time 99 amounts.
Yes, that's right.
So,
yeah,
but the first bit's free, but you can't get it on its own.
Yeah, it's just important that you use our accounting convention as you're evaluating your Portable Alpha purchase.
Yeah.
That's perfectly reasonable to impose on your customer.
And the more problems that you're trying to solve with Portable Alpha, the more expensive it becomes.
Yes. I probably, misjudged the negotiations there by throwing out a number first thing.
You just hit them with $50.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like
I should have, include shipping. It does include handling, but not shipping.
Yeah. And, given that this is a financial services product, we may also include some performance fees and administrative fees on top of that. And then there's of course the mailing fee in addition to shipping and handling.
There's a couple of like minor transaction fees as well, and the management fee is paid annually, independent of how fast you consume it or whether it actually fills you up or anything. Do we just charge that?
Yeah, we also reserve the right to send you more Portable Alpha at any time and charge you for it.
Yeah. It's basically like that old CD club where we just send you CDs and we charge you bunches of money.
But important to note that Portable Alpha, relative to actual products that are popular in the financial services industry, is a comparative bargain.
Good point. The science of our Portable Alpha is no less dubious than the science of most alpha in financial markets. So we got that going for us.
Yeah, and actually, ours, will, help you prevent against, all sorts of winter maladies. It's got a nice dose of vitamin C in there. And it'll wake you up. It's got a whole bunch of taurine in there as well.
Oh my goodness. I didn't realize our Portable Alpha had taurine in it. That's great.
Really? Yeah.
That's great. Because then you get vitamin C, you get taurine. And for the people on Wall Street, maybe you mix in a little bit of vodka or something. I don't know. Not required.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in college and you're underage, you can get your Portable Alpha virgin. But for the people there on Wall Street that are trying to think about how to celebrate the new year, Portable Alpha.
Yeah, Portable Alpha rum and Coke. Anyway.
Are we going to put Portable We might need to put Portable Alpha up on the website pretty soon. Are we ready?
Oh, yeah. No, there's a whole, series of product lines out there that we'll be ready to take orders from before too long.
Beautiful. Onward and upward.
And then we're going public,
Yeah, we're going to list.
Some list our podcast.
Yeah.
But what are we doing in this episode? We're looking back. It is the last episode of the year.
And the decade.
And it has been rather a year and a decade. 12 free money episodes so far. What the hell have we talked about?
We've talked about a bunch of stuff. And I think in the planning for this, we figured we would try to rehearse a little bit. What were the key themes from our first 12 episodes? What were some of the things that we feel like we wanted to drive home as the kinds of things we're going to continue to talk about? Is that fair?
Yeah.
For me, I think the most important one is just like why we're doing this. And I would say, the notion of free money for me has always been about trying to help the biggest pools of capital on earth, the pension funds, the sovereign funds, have more freedom to maneuver, to innovate, to be creative in the way they deploy capital, obviously to reduce the costs that Wall Street is taking out of them, but also to potentially solve big problems. And so for me, it's like first and foremost to explain to our audience of 22 years.
Very nice people.
11
Very nice
people.
Excellent people.
Yep. Excellent people. The best people. Who these organizations are and who runs them and what are they doing? And so, this need to understand the biggest pools of capital on earth and to help explain to, normal people that aren't nerds like us exactly what's going on is kind of a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it sort of emerged out of, I guess it was originally a dissertation idea, right? Where, I had been like reading a whole bunch of queer studies stuff and like, read all this stuff about how assumptions of heterosexuality affect behavior, right? Like where, you're presumed to be heterosexual by default. And that kind of creates all of these unstudied standards. And, I was kind of holding that up next to my financial stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, unstudied norms. That's what we do in financial services.
Totally.
And let's do our best to expose those, right? And ideally, when you think about what free money ultimately means, liberated pools of capital, what a wonderful world that would be where, socially linked pools of capital were able to invest actively on behalf of their stakeholders without arbitrary constraints placed there by folks who are trying to make money off of them.
That's right. And I think in order, like liberating this capital, freeing this capital, first we're kind of obligated to explain, perhaps again, that the pools of capital we're focused on, the pension funds, the sovereign funds, they are the base of capitalism. Most of the risk capital out there in the world today comes out of an endowment foundation, pension fund, sovereign fund, insurance company. And because of their time horizon, they have very long time horizons. Many of the liabilities these organizations have extend 70, 80 years into the future. So that time horizon allows them to start thinking about really important things like, gender equality, diversity, climate change, good governance, all these issues that in a very short time horizon often get explained away as non-financial or non-commercial. The longer your time horizon, the more you can actually begin to integrate those things into your decision making, because at a long enough time horizon, they affect value. And so we're focusing on these pools of capital because they're massive and they're the base of capitalism, but we're also focusing on them because of their time horizon and their ability to solve big problems in capitalism today.
Yeah, because if you're the government of Norway pension fund, you own 1% of listed equities. What's good for the world is good for your portfolio.
That's right. Exactly.
My first theme for this year so far has been if we were to explain it to someone on the street, they'd think we're crazy. Which keeps coming up when we talk about the sort of collectively or the individually, kind of rational and collectively insane behavior that kind of pervades, financial capitalism in the absence of more awakening of its participants, right? So, you have folks who are, finding ways to make money by, snipping $1 or $2 off of a financial transaction and really, engaging in an arms race instead of, building value. And if I were to draw a chain of that, I would sound like I was wearing a tinfoil hat, and perhaps I am.
No, you don't have one on today. You don't have your CIO hat on or your tinfoil hat on.
I've got my hoodie on.
But I think so. We're trying to study these organizations And these organizations oftentimes represent our greatest hope at solving climate change. If we need $1 trillion a year going into climate solutions, where are we going to get it? We're going to get it from these organizations. The problem is when you start to try to study them, you start unraveling these individually rational and collectively insane behaviors. And I think that is kind of the next key message, which is your message, which is like, look, if we're going to actually have any chance of moving this capital, we need to kind of meet these pension funds where they are. We don't get to like prescribe behaviors to them because they have a whole series of decision-making constraints that are just crazy. You know, they don't do first-time funds. They have these prudent person rules that push them to be conservative. They have monopolies over their asset base, which means that the organizations themselves will never go out of business, which then pushes the people that work at these organizations to actually try to optimize for them not getting fired in a permanent organization rather than doing what's best for the organization. And all of these things come together into this like weird, murky space at the very base of our capitalist system. Very few people on earth begin to unravel this and understand what are the incentives they're setting. What are the incentives they're setting for private equity, for hedge funds, for all of it? And that's why we're doing this. I mean, if we go back to the thesis you were going to do with me at Stanford, it was about unraveling all of this for a new audience. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I think like if I were to explain what, the status quo is, right? Like just imagine a standard pension trying to make an investment. I mean, to me, it's like, imagine trying to build a building and going through the zoning board permissions, only, you've got like 100,000 or 1 million people who might want to weigh in on what you're doing, not just, the 17 busybodies who show up at the meeting, and, the relatively contentious local board. So it's, investing, but it's also politics and social, and the study of social cohesion at a level of abstraction much larger than we're used to thinking at.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of leads me into my next theme, which is that these organizations are the engine of capitalism, but they exist because governments wanted them. And so you're like, wait, what? So if the governments have basically set up the base of capitalism, how can capitalism be free? How can we have a free market? This is the challenge for me as I'm constantly trying to deal with like, how do we unlock capital for market-based solutions to all these things, recognizing that the capital itself at the core emerged out of a decision by a government to pre-fund a pension, a government to incentivize a foundation through the tax code, an endowment through the tax code, all these different entities, this pooling of capital that's gone on incredibly quickly since the 1950s, you can trace back to governmental decisions. And so this isn't about being like, oh, well, what would the free market do? Sadly, the market isn't free. So if for you to actually create market-based solutions, you need to realize that this is not just about, buyers and sellers agreeing on a price in a free market. This is about unraveling what's going on with these giant mega pension funds that are trying to play in the market while being constrained by government.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, I think that, the idea of free market, I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is a discrete theme, but, maybe it is. Free markets are kind of a pleasant fiction, right? Like it's like a bunch of folks at the University of Chicago, got together, Milton Friedman and co. Basically decided that any inhibition to market action is, sort of tantamount to destroying social value. And that's just a very persuasive theory that people tend to believe describes reality.
That's right.
Which, and it's the same kind of like tinfoil hat stuff when you try to point out that it's not real. Almost like sort of a collective Santa Claus that we've cooked ourselves up.
Oh, interesting. What are you suggesting here? That Santa isn't real? I need to whisper because my daughter's nearby.
So you brought your kids up on the Santa lie.
I did. I want them to I don't want them to trust these adult figures, without questioning authority. And so what better way than to, have them live a lie?
it's no fun to grow up not believing in Santa.
Exactly.
But with the concept of the free market, it's actually actively harmful sometimes because the folks will defer decision making to this amorphous entity. There's actually really good literature, comparing the way that we talk about the free market to the way that we talk about deities in faith traditions. Where it's like, the God of the market will come and look after us all with their beneficent hand, value all things accurately and allocate all resources as they need to be allocated.
Totally. The funny thing is exactly what you're talking about, though, is it's like the market-based logic and the governmental logic, they flow into each other.
Yeah, there's no conflict, really.
Like, go back and look up all the innovations over the last 50 years that have come out of government, like whether it's the internet or, all these like clean energy innovations that have come out of the lab system. It's incredible. Core
jetpacks
research
came out of the government.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think we had Velcro. That was a big one. That was a big one. Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about making the world a better place. But for real, though, like the idea that, some sort of governmental or social body has no place in free market capitalism is the kind of thing that you can only believe if you were to espouse a very fundamentalist view of what it would mean to be a free market capitalist.
Yeah. The markets are the most amazing aggregation of signals. It's a way to democratize planning, right? That's what's powerful. And so we can use the market to like plan for capital allocation and where we should be building companies and how much it should cost. And I think that's why I find it just so compelling to try to build market-based solutions to things. But they're all just tools here. And I think when we go back and we realize that the capital that we're using in these markets usually can be traced back to some governmental choice, it then reminds you that when you see hedge fund dudes buying, I think maybe you noted that today on Twitter, Sloan. I can't remember.
Pension funds can have a little alpha as a treat.
Oh no! Oh, yeah, that was so good. That was so good. I saw something else today where one of these hedge fund guys is buying a $250 million apartment in New York. And that comes after the $150 million house in Florida and and it's like, remind me where he's getting all this money. Isn't it from pension fund LPs, endowment LPs, foundation LPs, sovereign fund LPs? Yes. It's government. Yeah. The government allowed these people to make this money because they said, we want to pool it and we want it to grow faster through financial markets. So, this is the challenge when we're thinking about how do we solve big problems or how do we cut out Wall Street's fee machine. It's not as simple as saying, what would the market do? You have to balance all these different things.
The market, as I understand it, like the history of the joint stock company, it started off as like, how do we explore the new world, which is this like objectively very government linked thing.
Right.
And by limiting liability and pooling capital to invest in big ventures, folks could, back ships without recourse to themselves, without the risk of going absolutely broke if, folks were to meet their end in that journey.
Yeah.
And brutal as that is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. This takes me to my next theme, which is like, how do we bring, if we really do need these organizations to innovate, how are we going to do that? Like now the listeners realize that the base of our capitalist system exists in this kind of government context. And oftentimes the people governing these plans are political. They are either appointed by politicians or they are politicians themselves or they represent some stakeholder group. And this is where I've spent a lot less time thinking about changing governance and a lot more time thinking about how technology will usher in a new set of inputs for how we generate return, but also by starting pension funds on the innovation journey in technology, we can end by changing governance. But starting with governance is really hard because these boards of directors often don't want to vote themselves out of power. You can't walk up in front of CalPERS board and say, look, there should only be 7 people on this thing. Most of you people shouldn't be here. That doesn't work well.
Yeah. There's a real politic to this whole thing that is kind of distressing to consider. Where like you think about like what would make, like why would a pension fund be interested in adopting ESG, which, I think you and I can accept as a good, right? Like it is, if to have an asset owner fundamentally interested in, the way that its companies behave in the open market, like good thing.
Totally.
But why would someone want to do that?
Well,
and like,
yeah, I mean, I could answer that question straight, but I think I know where you're going. It's like, it becomes a political question for people when it should.
Yeah.
This is partly why I actually don't mind this fiduciary test we have today that keeps people focused on commercial success, because it allows us to push back on the board members. And when we can show board members that ESG actually helps you understand the assets you're holding better and thus allows you to make more money because you're taking a longer term view, all these things, then in a way the boards are forced to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I love the fact that they might have more discretion. I think I want to do a judo move on their constraints and force them to behave well because they're so unpredictable as it is. At least I can predict that if it's something that makes money for a pension fund, the pension funds will do it. That's a useful tool in our tool belt.
And that's kind of a theme too, is like people do things that make money.
That's right.
Like, and I think that, a lot of
except for politicians.
Well, I mean, they may be making some money on the side.
Yes, I've noted that in our current political setup.
Yeah, that great.
Which hotel should we stay at? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's right by the White House.
That's perfect.
Trump Hotel.
No, that's perfect. We should host the G7 at a golf club too while we're at it.
Well, I mean, and of course, there's that great conspiracy theory about the folks trading volatility around like trade war announcements and like all those other great things, right?
Yeah.
Which I mean, it's one of my favorite conspiracy theories out of nowhere.
It is a good one.
But as an investor, though, like cash flow is kind of the scoreboard,
right?
And folks are incented at the the level of like the manager that an asset owner contracts with, but also like the board ultimately is responsible for maximizing the value of the holdings.
That is it. And so it's so funny. Like we are trying to free this money to operate in a free market according to logic we understand, so that we can use that logic to direct the capital to do things that are socially constructive.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very hard, to think about how we would rewrite the rules, right? Like what would the rules be? And so, for the first part, I think most of this podcast is simply about what are the rules and how do these investors actually behave? And then, maybe in season 12, we'll say, look, here's how the rules should change. I mean, I have a lot of ideas how pension funds can invest better. But I think my big kind of academic project, I think for the next 10 years, I've actually been in the process of setting this out, is to begin to think about what are all the rules that govern these pools of capital? What are they? And can we understand the effects they have on the deployment of that capital? And from there, then we can start to think about constructive changes to the system by targeting the base of capitalism. Everybody's like, oh, we need capitalism to work better. Everybody's talking about that. Mm-hmm. But like, how many people are hosting podcasts like this talking about the base of capitalism? I haven't seen any. This is the only one.
It's really understood. I mean, I think that we're quick to discuss symptoms of the sort of malfunctions in capitalism, where it's like, people will say every billionaire is a policy failure. People will say that the system works for some people, but not for others. But there's like so much leakage in the construction of how we allocate capital that it's like,
Exactly.
Which is again why I wind up feeling freaking crazy every time I talk out loud about what it is.
I know. Every time we turn off this podcast, I just go and run into a brick wall a few times.
Yeah, I just get in the shower in the fetal position, just cry a little bit. It's healthy. It's healthy. My therapist says I'm functional.
No,
so
it's good.
Great.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's all good. I think that's enough for my themes. All my other themes that I have listed here kind of tie into the ones I already mentioned.
I've got a couple, that are kind of more forward looking.
Yeah. Good.
Which is sort of like, if you think about like, how would one of these pools like orient itself to survive the next decade, right? Because like if we know anything, we know that a prediction is like not worth the paper it's printed on.
Totally.
So I think the first kind of line item I have is like, or piece of advice, I guess, is be more than the sum of your partnerships. Meaning like an asset owner that holds a bunch of interests in limited partnerships, like private equity funds and so on and so forth, must endeavor to be more than just a source of capital, like a real partner with those folks, and must endeavor to kind of build knowledge through those relationships. Which I think of as I think that's a you point.
That's a strong one for me. I would give that a strong seconding. And that goes to this alt data piece. That goes to the drive of partnerships with managers, and really just about a stronger alignment of interest between the asset owner community that we generally think about and the asset manager community, which is often relied on to manage the capital of the asset owners. We tend to spend a lot of time talking about the Canadian pension plans or some of the big, sovereign funds that can manage the money on their own. But the reality is most of the asset allocators, asset owners, pension funds rely on their managers. And so finding a way to bring the knowledge in all those partnerships more coherently into the pension fund so the pension fund can make smarter decisions, that's going to be a really big part of preparing for the future, for the next decade. What are the disruptions coming? Who better to talk to than all of your asset managers out there dealing day in and day out with disruptions? And if you can find a way to aggregate all those weak signals coming from all of your managers and unravel strong signals, then who knows? Maybe you'll actually be able to move assets around in a way that adds value. That's the hope.
But a further subtext to that though is like, why compete necessarily? Like if you're going to be thinking about yourself as a partner, you may not necessarily want to be engaged in this hunt for alpha, which we mock pretty openly. But
everybody's going to get it, Sloan. Don't worry. Everybody's going to get their alpha.
The portable alpha, sign up right on the website. But
75% of our listeners are above average. We know that already.
Yeah, well, only geniuses listen to this podcast.
That's true.
Because their ears would melt otherwise. But if those geniuses happen to be at an organization that's a little under resourced, they might be better off, figuring out how they can partner with other under resourced organizations to just access not necessarily outperforming investments, but well performing investments.
That's right.
Just access interesting, durable ones.
Exactly. Collaboration as a means of innovation. I think I wrote a book on that.
I've heard something about that.
And I have, it's funny. I was giving a talk yesterday at the CFA up in San Francisco, and I found myself just kind of like talking during my talk about how as organizations like pension funds transition from certain sizes to other sizes, like 10 billion into the 50 billion range, inevitably the model of institutional investment you're running has to shift. You can't run the exact same model when you get to be really big than when you were small, especially if you were running an endowment or a Canadian style pension plan, which is a very specific type of investment model. And so those organizations, as they're transitioning from one model to the next, will want to collaborate, partner with each other, figure out which is the next model that they should be working on. And so all of that collaboration coming together is about helping these under-resourced investors find ways to continue to achieve your objectives and not necessarily see each other as big competitors out there for that alpha, but as you say, as kind of partners in this higher level project, which is, long-term sustainable performance.
Yeah. And that ties actually right into the next, sort of theme or / pronouncement that I have, which is, don't beat the index, build a better one.
Oh yeah.
Because that, I think it's sort of really provocative to imagine that perhaps the benchmark that you're using is not the ideal yardstick. And then what would be?
This for me, it's funny. This goes to the problem of governance, though. Again, it's like there were a lot of great indices being built using, all the new data that we can collect that offer differences to the cap weighted index. Most of it, for those people out there who don't understand how these indices are built, an index is like a basket of securities that offer a kind of market return. Right. So public market return, a U.S. market return, whatever it is. And most of these baskets of securities are calculated based on a cap weighting, which means they kind of look at the market capitalization of the stock. And as those market caps change, they either increase the amount in the index or they decrease it. So what you end up doing in these cap weighting methodologies is buying more of companies that are expensive and buying less of companies that are cheap, which is not awesome. That's not actually what you want to do as an investor. And so the sooner you can build indices that have a different type of methodology of construction, the better. You want to equal weighting, or ideally you can get down into the details of the companies and build different methodologies. There's a company called Syntax in New York that has tried to do this very well. SSPY is the ticker symbol, stratified spider. And their notion of stratification is their methodology for building out a new index. But here's the kicker. The boards see these indices as active management, because for them, they're looking at the index that they've approved, which is, ACWI or S&P or whatever it is. And if there's deviation from that, then they're like, oh, so this is an active bet. Even if you think you're running a passive portfolio, the boards of directors often don't see it that way. They want to understand why is it different than the benchmark? This isn't passive. And so a lot of CIOs will say, these indexes, these benchmarks are great, these new ones, but until my board gets comfort with it, I can't do it. So it's just super hard.
Yeah, it's a big problem to bring into the for like a completely new yardstick. But I think also just by being an active owner of the shares that they have, these asset owners have the opportunity to just improve the beta returns, which are the sort of average, cheap, readily available returns that you can get by buying the same old plain old index, which is sort of like a weird, again, tricky subtext, which I guess is I'm Sloan Tricky Subtext Ortel. That's my
tricky subtext.
That's my my punk band name.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, it's been an interesting 12 episodes, and I think we're sort of just starting to scratch the surface of topics here. I mean, you can imagine if we're talking about the base of capitalism, then there's endless topics to talk about. But so far, it's been really fun. I think, differing perspectives and trying to talk to a different audience than I normally do, which is a bunch of fellow nerds. That's who I like to talk to generally, and this has been really fun.
Yeah, there's someone listening to this right now who's going, "What are you saying? I'm not a nerd?
What am I, not a nerd?
You're saying I'm not nerdy enough for you?
You are nerdy enough. You one person."
Exactly. You're perfect just the way you are.
Great. If you made it this far into this podcast, you are a nerd. Actually, now that I think about what we talked about, if you're still listening.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean,
you know what? Whoever's still listening,
if
you email me, I may give you $10 and you give this code word, bananas.
But, in absence of that, I think.
I love it.
It's time for our end of show tradition, which is the Dear Ashby segment, wherein I ask you 3 questions that have come up from the listeners.
Hit me with them.
Are you prepared? Are you ready?
I think so. I saw some of your notes earlier, so I think I have some prepared ideas. I don't have prepared answers, but
so what is pi to 35 digits? All right.
I can give you 3.
Have pensions begun diligencing real estate investments differently given the threat posed by climate change? How long until coastal property is uninvestable?
Pretty soon on the last one. And I'll tell you why in a second. I love that you asked this. It's almost like I planted this one with you, but because it's such a big topic for me these days. There's a massive increase in the demand for this type of data where, long-term investors are oftentimes the terminal holders of these assets, right? So they're going to buy real estate and then they're going to hold it for 30, 40, 50 years. And so for them, they're thinking, is this building going to be insurable? Is this building going to be underwater? What are the implications of buying this building in a vulnerable place for my CapEx and my OpEx, my capital expenditures and my operating expenditures for holding the asset? You can imagine in a world of climate change that's really volatile, for example, where you have freezing and unfreezing, and then you have incredibly humid summers, and then you have a storm. Just all that volatility in temperature will require, for example, a parking lot to get repaved more often, or having to paint walls sooner, or replace handrails. All this basic stuff actually needs to be modeled. So there's a demand for this data like I've literally never seen it. I think this forest fire epidemic we've had here in California, the bushfires in Australia, the incredible volatility of temperatures in places like Greenland, on and on, right? People are starting to freak out. And the long-term investors, who are usually huge investors in real estate, are like, what do we got? Now, the problem is most of the signals out there are these kind of green, yellow, red climate signals that aren't really useful. So the big, the Economist did a story on this, and they were listed off 12 different companies that are trying to deliver these climate risk signals to all types of actors, governments, companies, investors, et cetera. But in my mind, the big challenge from here to, 2020 and beyond is taking these climate risk signals and connecting it to the actual assets. So you aren't just thinking, hey, this is in a red zone. What does that mean? What does a red zone mean? Connect that red zone for me to some sensitivity around my capital expenditure. That is something a pension fund board will be able to handle and say, oof, so if we discount it like this, the valuation is that, and I don't want to do that. That's the type of logic investors understand. A board looking at an ESG report where some of the assets are yellow, some are green, some are red, they don't know how to translate that into a risk score that they need to apply to an asset. It's really hard. So that's what needs to come next.
Yeah, and a lot of the pronouncements that I saw a piece from the Union of Concerned Scientists about this, where they were they put out this press release that was really scary. It was 1 million Florida homes worth $351 billion will be at risk from tidal flooding. There's an additional $5 billion in annual property tax revenue in jeopardy.
Wow.
And that's scary, but think about the vagueness of at risk and in jeopardy.
Super vague. The most vague. Imagine that we told these real estate investors what the cost of resiliency would be. And if they don't build the cost of resiliency into their pro formas today, that these buildings may not be insurable, which is another way of saying you may never be able to sell this building. If you can't get insurance, most professional investors won't buy it.
Yeah.
So this is the coming 2-3 years, we're going to get really good at converting these climate signals into metrics that investors understand. And that means that the investability of the coastal property you asked me about isn't really a function of whether or not climate change is happening or not. It's a function of how fast we get this data and the metrics into the hands of insurance companies and investors. So if you're owning coastal property and you're like, I think I got time until this 2% wheelie dealy. No, you don't have time, because actually the problem doesn't have to do with, sea level rise today. The problem is insurance companies looking at sea level rise 12 years from now and changing the insurance. And you've seen those insurance rates change for the forest fire risk.
Yeah. Yeah, and it will, and I mean, a small change in the cost of insurance just can wipe out the entire financial return of an asset.
Totally. Yeah.
Which I guess ties right into this next question, which is, what is the biggest surprise you can imagine happening next year?
Right. My idea, I believe technology will do stuff I did not expect. That's what I believe.
That's a surprise.
Here's the one that I also was like, why don't we have static electricity powering phones?
Oh, that's cool.
There's that little thing you can buy that allows you to have solar electricity charging your phone when you need it. If I run out of my battery, can't I just take my shoes off and get my socks on the carpet and, find a way to charge my phone?
Yeah. I mean, that'd be awesome.
That'd be surprising.
I guess it is pretty cool already when you can run your socks on the carpet and they, you get that little shock, and then you control your friends and family with that.
Yeah.
But that's
the other one that I wrote down is
power.
A minor civil war because of a certain impeachment. But let's not go there,
Just the small matter of the fundamental nature of governance.
I don't really want to talk too much about civil war, but yeah.
Well, yeah,
that would be surprising, but not crazy.
My biggest surprise next year would be nothing bad happens at all.
Oh, that would be mega surprising. Yeah.
Yeah. It's for the impeachment reason, the Brexit reason, I would be genuinely shocked, when we do the next version of this wrap up podcast next year, if, the new Brexit hasn't jeopardized the Good Friday Agreement, and, Great Britain is still the United Kingdom is still a United Kingdom with the Northern Ireland, stuff intact, right? If we're still, the constitutional republic of the United States and American democracy, survives unharmed.
Feels precarious, I have to say.
Yeah.
For posterity, it's not posterity, right?
But yeah, for butt reasons.
For butt reasons. No, I believe I'm referring to posterity. Sloan.
Yes, exactly.
I think we're in this moment in time. I'm scared. I look out around the world. I see the entrenched political interests, and I think I'm legitimately freaked out about where we go with what's going on in Washington right now. Leave aside the Brexit stuff and the nationalism, and it's a scary moment in this country where we're impeaching a demigod, and there's a lot of people who they are hard to convince of. Yeah, you would look at the merits of the case and say, seems pretty clear that this dude tried to influence a foreign power to investigate a political rival, in fact, the top political rival. But still, there's a huge percentage of people who just don't see it. And so it is a scary moment.
I put that impeachment, actually removing him from office, at about a 10 to 15% probability. Just because, I know I was talking. My dad is a super Republican. I was talking to him about this, and he was like, "What do you think the State Department is set up to do exactly, if not pressure foreign governments to cohere to adopt our views?"
They are, but just not personal agendas. I mean, it's exactly, he's not wrong, but exactly. You're not supposed to use that, state institution for personal gain. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah, exactly. So, but all right, let's talk about Christmas, which is way more fun.
Let's do that.
Why do so many Christmas traditions stress big scary animals that lurk in the forest and hunger for blood. In particular, the European Krampus.
What is that one?
You know,
what is a Krampus?
Krampus is a horned anthropomorphic figure described as half goat, half demon, who during the Christmas season punishes children who have misbehaved. And yeah, he's actually, yeah. I mean, in a lot of Central Europe, is like pretty popular. They still have like Krampus marches and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And then there's the Yule cat, which is even crazier. The Yule cat is a huge and vicious cat that lurks about the snowy countryside during Christmas time and eats people who have not received any new clothes to wear before Christmas Eve.
Interesting. So I was thinking about this one and I was like, look, I think Christmas is there's like two parts here. On the one hand, it's about family and feeling the love and like sitting around and playing some like cheesy music and putting the fire on. And on the other hand, it's all about disciplining children. I mean, like this elf watching you on a shelf. That's the creepiest,
that's so creepy.
Creepiest shit ever. Naughty list. He's checking it twice. He knows what's up, you know?
Yeah. I mean, they're just inculcating kids into the surveillance state.
They are. and this like creepy dude comes down your chimney and puts coal in your sock. Dude, Christmas is about putting fear into children to get them to behave. And frankly, I kind of like that because my kids are crazy. But it's also about family. You know, it's also about family. So it's like,
yeah,
you know, and then it's also about, you know, teaching kids don't trust adults because we lie to you. That's also what it's about at a certain point.
That's a great lesson.
You know, don't trust all these authority figures when they tell you that this dude is real. Eventually it all comes out and you're like, huh, what else are they telling me?
Yeah, when did people stop believing in Santa? I think like for me it was probably I think I really believed in Santa until third grade, but like in second grade I started to get like suspicious.
Yeah.
You know, but I would just like cry every time someone suggested it wasn't real.
Yeah. I don't know.
My sister pulled the best troll move on me ever when she was in like fourth or fifth grade and I was like, you know, Santa's not real, right? And she just bursts out crying. and is totally screwing with me.
Oh, that's amazing. So it was
she was just like, how dare you? I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Yeah. I mean, my son kind of like messed me up because he spotted me putting an Easter egg around Easter, and within 10 minutes had unraveled the entire gig on all of it, from teeth fairies to, you know, it was like he was like 5 years old. I was like, Jesus, that was fast. But my other kid is still going, so you know, kind of depends.
Yeah, just got to pretend until, you know, to keep the joy alive for as long as possible until, you know, all the mystery is gone.
Yeah.
And then, you know, magic is dead. And
and then they can sleep better at night knowing that Krampus is not out there. Neither is the Yule cat to drain your blood.
I love the Yule cat is an Icelandic idea. And like, I just love the idea of eating people who have not received new clothes to wear before Christmas Eve. Like
it's just random.
Yeah, well, like I mean, we make fun of Santa Claus and Christmas and the Hallmark tradition as like kind of a consumerist thing, but you know, that at least to me is like, oh well, cool. There's like a more of a root in there of consumption inside of Christmas than, you know, we might, because I think that's pre-Christian. You know, so anyway.
Anywho.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, have
there
a
is
great
no free
holiday.
Market. You too. And to all of you listening, we love you very much.
We do.
If there is still an Earth, we will see you next year.
We will. We will. Yeah.
But we love you. Bye.
Bye.